It's just fantastic.
Captain's Log, Subdate 210601.5. I was advised by a rehabbed pup to watch The Human Centipede so as to obtain new ideas for ISOQ punishments. As I was disgusted by what I saw, I sewed that particular man's mouth to another inmate's asshole for making me suffer that movie. Welcome everyone to the Halls of Injustice. Today we welcome inmate number 075, Paul Robson, to the ISO Cubes. He has, over his rather long life, committed a whole plethora of crimes, but we're going to focus on one with a rather strange twist to it. Inmate 075 was a cage fighter. Not a very successful one, but he was a cage fighter nonetheless. And we have to reference this because it was used by the prosecution in the trial against him for the crime he committed. Now, while for a separate offence, one of 92 in fact that he was convicted of, with the total being 21 convictions, now 22, he was at HMP Northumberland. While there, he started a, and let's quote this, clandestine relationship with one of the prison guards, who was at the time herself married, by the name of Caroline Cale. Caroline Cale, a 47-year-old, had previously worked as a social worker, a police officer, then to a prison officer where she then met Paul Robson, and then took on a teaching role while behind bars to then move on to a role at a school as a teaching assistant. Paul Robson, once he had completed his time at Northumberland, moved in with Caroline Cale, who had then separated with her husband, who had at one point in fact asked her while they were there at the prison if she was in fact seeing Paul Robson, which she denied. After a number of years together though, the relationship between Caroline and Paul had soured. Ultimately, this led to Caroline asking Paul to leave her home, which he did. But this isn't where the story ends, obviously. Paul's in trouble, remember? Caroline started a new relationship. Now this is where the story gets rather interesting, because it concerns a 15-year-old boy. Caroline was 47, and she had started a relationship with one of the boys at the school she worked at. All articles reference her being in a relationship with a 15-year-old boy. I do also want to point out, she had started the affair with the 15-year-old boy, wrong word being affair, but the Daily Mail's called it that, so let's go with this for a moment. I'll correct him in a minute. Before she broke up with Paul Robson. The word is grooming, by the way, and when it comes to a relationship with a 15-year-old, there are other words for that, and it is in and of itself a crime, something I'm almost certain she knew. Now, she kept this very quiet and very, very secret, but Paul Robson found out, so Paul Robson made life very difficult for Caroline. One of the bigger things he had done to make sure this point absolutely stood out was that he blackmailed Caroline to the tune of £35,000, telling her he was in fact going to ruin her because all he'd have to do is tell a few neighbours, which he had done anyway. Now, Caroline did in fact transfer £29,000 to his personal account and then took out a £10,500 loan, having previously been solvent, to pay him off. But days later, Paul Robson decided, well, I've got this money, I'm still a bit salty. Instead of going to the police and reporting this, I'm going to continue to dig a hole. So he instead sent messages to former neighbours about Caroline's relationship with the boy. He also continued to send threatening messages to Caroline, and this is where we get to a rather nice little fork in the road. He's dug the hole so deep, so which way does he go? Does he continue to dig the hole all the way to China, or does he stop and walk away? I'm not going to give you a chance to guess. I think we all know which one he took. You're right, he went for the former. 3 days later, after receiving that money and sending all those messages, he drove from Glasgow to Linton, a 3-hour drive, having bought himself a locksmith's bar, a magnetic GPS car tracker, screwdrivers, pliers, a wrench, and ammonia, which he had decanted into a washing-up bottle. Upon arriving at her property, he was seen on CCTV prowling outside her house. Witnesses did in fact hear Caroline shout, "Get out!" And later that evening, Paul Robson knocked on his former neighbour's house to tell them that Caroline was in a bad way. Nurse Barbara Lee immediately went round, where she found blood, hair, Caroline face down on the floor, along with there being a teenage boy in shock who was vomiting blood and frightened. Until the police and paramedics arrived, Barbara Lee, the nurse, attempted CPR. She was taken, Caroline, to hospital, but tests showed her brain was catastrophically injured, and eventually Caroline succumbed to her injuries. So what happened? During an assault, Paul Robson had taken both the victims' phones, which left them with no way for them to call for help. He also wanted to use their phones to find out what they'd been saying to each other, and he then posted messages on her Facebook account about the affair with the schoolboy, grooming. Robson also emailed Caroline's ex-husband while she was on a life support machine in the hospital. When Paul Robson was arrested and interviewed, he did not answer any questions, but he did use a prepared statement to indicate that he was broken by her death and had claimed someone else had attacked him when he visited her home. Just before I forget, the teenage boy at the property was the boy she was having the affair with, and Paul Robson did in fact attack him with a meat cleaver and a pair of scissors. And originally there were reporting restrictions on this, but thankfully the judge lifted them following the completion of the evidence given by the teenager. You may have noticed a video being played on the screen at some point. Paul Robson wouldn't hand over his glasses. Now, he claimed he was blind without them, and because of his background, it took a number of officers to convince him to put his hands behind his back so they could take them. He's quite confrontational. Naturally, when this went to trial, though, he shut up, and all his lies unfolded, because after a week, he was found guilty. And with that, we get to a sentence. For being convicted of murder, Paul Robson, inmate 075, aged 50, was sentenced to life with a minimum of 35 years, which means he'll be 85 when he comes out. Now, he was also found guilty of trying to kill the teenager and for blackmailing Caroline over her grooming of a 15-year-old boy. So he got 35 years for attempted murder and 5 years for blackmail, with all sentences running concurrently. Now, we are in a rather odd position here. He should not have committed the murder, he should not have blackmailed anyone. Of course not. He should not have tried to kill a teenager. But there is a crime now being overlooked because of that, and I'm in a really odd position, because I really want to rail on Caroline for that. What she was doing with a 15-year-old boy is not a relationship. It is grooming. But I can fully understand, respect, and appreciate why it is often overlooked in favour of the murder charge, since she is not here to face any kind of justice for the crime that she committed. Although we did bring back Jimmy Savile, I'm just saying. Perhaps in the future we could reanimate you as well, who knows. As we are done, I do want to know what you all think. Get in your cell, Mr. Robson. You are going to be there for a long time. Your sentence is 35 years minimum. My sentence is 350 years minimum. Your bones are going to line that cell's walls. I would very much like to know what you all think, so please do let me know in the comments down below. As a final thing, I shall be streaming on Twitch tonight. If I don't see you there, have a fantastic day. Thank you all very much for listening.